is to try to find a behavior that serves you in a better way. And I still use the term good and bad because I think implicitly most people know what we're talking about when we say that, like, and we use it in everyday conversation. But from a practical standpoint, it's just and the effort and energy used judging yourself and feeling guilty about things is not well spent or productive. And so if that is a way that helps people get over that, then I think that's useful.
Yeah. There's also certainly a hierarchy of habits too. What I see a lot of, and I'm interested in your experience working with so many people on this, is people honing in, zeroing in on a behavior, a habit that they want to change, but they're kind of identifying the wrong one. Like, if your goal is to lose 10 pounds, or the behavior that you want to change, the habit that you want to change is going from sedentary to being a runner, for example. You're going to run your first 5K, set this goal, but you have a victim mentality and you think the world is against you and everything bad in your life is somebody else's fault, and you're not addressing and redressing the habits that are fueling that identity. You can run as many 5Ks or marathons as you want, but ultimately you're channeling your energy in the wrong direction.
Right. Yeah. The energy is focused on like the thing that makes the last like 2% of difference, not the thing that makes 95% of difference.
Right.
You see this in all kinds of places. I mean, the example you just gave is good, but just take someone who's trying to get in shape. I mean, people will. What kind of protein powder should I get? What knee sleeves do I need? What are the best weightlifting shoes? And all that stuff is like the last 2% of difference. It's mostly like, don't miss workouts and get your reps in.
Yeah, but ultimately, I think that those people aren't even really interested in the answer. They're just stuck in analysis paralysis. Like, they sort of want to change their behavior, but they want to have all these questions answered, and they want to know exactly what they're doing before they'll even go take a walk, right? So how much do they really want to change that behavior? They're flirting with the idea of behavior change, but they're ultimately not at the place where they're ready to commit to anything. And so that makes them feel like they're doing something when they're actually just reinforcing that paralysis.
This is what, in the book, I call the difference between motion and action. Action can actually deliver a result, but motion is related to that, but never will. Like going to the gym and talking to a personal trainer about signing up, that's fine. That's related to getting in shape, but it doesn't matter how many times you talk to a personal trainer, you're never going to get in shape. Whereas like doing 10 squats, that actually can do something. It's like talking to the trainer is motion, doing squats is action.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people get trapped in motion. They get trapped in analysis paralysis because it is a way to feel like you're making progress without running the risk of failure.
Right, and it's more complicated and nuanced than that, because going and talking to the trainer is an important step if you've never done anything like that before.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, is it's not like you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not the only thing you should
Right,
do.
if that's the thing, if that doesn't create the momentum to take the additional step and set in motion a consistent flow of repeatable actions over time, then...
This is why I think identity is such a crucial issue with habits, is that true behavior change is really identity change, because you're not really looking to go from the type of person who doesn't run to the type of person who can run a 5K. That's fine, that's good, it's the outcome. But the goal is not to run a marathon, the goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to write a book, the goal is to become a writer. And once you identify as that type of person, in a sense, you're not even really pursuing behavior change anymore. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person that you already believe that you are.
Right.
It's like one thing to say, I want this. It's something different to say, I am this.
Yeah. You write a lot about this, and we can drill down on goals and the importance or lack thereof of goal setting. But ultimately, what really moves the needle is making a decision about the person that you want to be and starting to construct your life in a way that reinforces that identity that you idealize in yourself. So it's less about a finish line, and it becomes all about process and the journey.
I think that's right. You know, like what I said earlier about how habits are a method to embody a particular identity. That's really what we're looking to do here is how do I become the type of person that embodies this each day? How do I become the type of person who doesn't miss workouts? And that's another reason I like small habits, because if you have a really busy day and things are crazy and all you can do is 5 push-ups, if you're oriented around the result, around the outcome, it's easy to dismiss that. It's like, well, why would I even bother doing 5 push-ups? It's not going to get me in shape. But some days it's not about the result of the training. Some days it's about reinforcing being that type of person. You know, like, yes, life was crazy and things were really busy today, and the best I could do was getting 5 push-ups in, but I'm still the type of person who doesn't miss workouts, even when it's not ideal.
Right.
And in the long run, that can count for a lot, which is
Yeah.
the kind of twisted thing about small habits, which is that even though they're small, they can still be meaningful. And if they're meaningful, they actually are big.
Yeah. And that really gets at the foundation of this whole thing, which is that every great achievement is about small habits ultimately. And, you know, in this culture in which we live, it's all about, you know, shoot for the moon and like set these huge goals and be audacious and find the shortcut and all of that. But every successful person will tell you it's about the tiny little imperceptible, non-sexy things that they do every single day and have been doing for the last 10 or 20 years that got them from wherever they came from to the place that everyone aspires to be.
The crazy thing is habits are like the foundation for mastery in any area. And it's often the people who are at the peak of a particular area that have the best habits, that have like the most things automated and dialed in. You know, imagine, I always think of the story of Josh Waitzkin, who wrote The Art of Learning. And he gave an example of, he's doing, you know, Thai push hands, this martial art. And when I think about doing something like that, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be grappling with this person. Like, you know, I'm fully engaged on the wrestling component. But he had practiced it so many times and knew all the moves so well that he was able to more or less put that part of it on autopilot, and he would just focus on his opponent's eyes. And when they were getting ready to blink, then he would make his throw. And that was like how he found his advantage. That, to someone like me who hasn't done that, that sounds insane that you could even like get to that level. But the point is, in order to master any area, he has already habitualized everything else. He knows how to do the throws on autopilot. He knows where his feet should be on autopilot. He knows where his weight should be shifted. And because all of that is habitualized, he actually has the mental capacity available to focus on the thing that makes the last tiniest bit of difference at the highest level.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for anybody. You know, I mean, think about everything LeBron can do on autopilot. I mean, he doesn't have to think about shooting, dribbling, where he's at on the court. Like, all of that is just internalized at this point, and he can think about the offensive set or the thing that happened 3 possessions ago that he did to set them up for what he's going to do now. But most basketball players aren't even at that level because they haven't habitualized it.
Yeah. Have you seen the documentary Free Solo?
Yeah.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, good. So for people that are listening who haven't seen it, you should go out and see it immediately.
Alex Honnold.
It's Alex Honnold free soloing El Cap, and even if you think you know the story, I assure you that this movie will leave you with sweaty palms and your mind blown.
Dude, those rock climbing documentaries are crazy.
But this one is next level, and it speaks. The reason I bring it up is it speaks directly to what you're talking about, which is a level of process and mastery that is rare even at the highest levels. And you think of Alex as a master, but when you really get to understand the level of focus and intentionality and the amount of years that went into that accomplishment, you understand it on a whole different level. And you talk about automation. I mean, you see when he's climbing that wall, he knows every hold, every maneuver, every footstep. And there's actually only maybe 3 or 4 problem areas up the whole wall that he really had to double down on to make it work, and all the rest of it was so rote for him. And if you were to ask him, you know, he doesn't have to. He's not intellectualizing this. You know, it's so built into who he is that that the execution of climbing that wall is just a reflection of a lifetime of preparation and focus. That's followed in the wake of that success with him going back to his van and doing pull-ups, you know, because he is somebody, that's who he is, it's identity. It wasn't about, yes, he had that goal, and the goal was audacious, and he was successful in that goal, but he was successful in that pursuit because this is who he is fundamentally at his core.
I remember hearing a story about Brett Favre late in his career, and there was a particular crossing pattern this guy's running across the field, and the linebacker was interviewed after the game who was defending against the pass, and he was like 999 times out of 1,000, every time this play is run, based on my positioning, the pass is going to be going in front of the linebacker. And so he saw the play and read it and jumped up to intercept the pass, and Favre somehow implicitly noticed all of this and threw it behind him and hit the receiver in stride, and they ended up getting the first down in this big play.
Right, and all happening in a microsecond.
Yes, all of this is, for the average person, you'd stand out there in the middle of the play and it just would look like chaos. Everybody's moving around so fast. And the stories like that, and like Alex and these other ones who were telling, the only way that you can get to that level of, the only way he could even notice that is because every other thing about that play was already on autopilot. Mm-hmm. He had run it so many times that he could see the one thing that was different and make the adjustment on the fly. And those stories, of course, are incredible and inspiring, but they also make me realize that I don't know many people fully understand what it takes to be at the top of a field like that. You have to literally live it so that you can internalize all that stuff. I mean, the higher that you get on the curve, it's like the less margin for error that there is. And you need to work. I mean, Olympians will work for 4 years to shave off 2/100 of a second. Mm-hmm. And that you have to have that level of commitment because when you're going against the world's best, the margin is so small. Right. Anyway, I think habits play a central role in that. I think that they are crucial because the more that you can habitualize, the more you free up your mind to focus on the things that could make that last bit of difference.
So let's talk about habit change. We were attempting to launch into these 4 laws, and we haven't even gotten there yet.
All right,
so let's break these down.
Okay, so there are 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, so that's about the cue. Make it attractive, that's about the craving. Make it easy, this is the response, and then make it satisfying, which is the reward.
And this is all about adopting a quote-unquote good habit.
Correct. And then you can invert each of those 4 for breaking a bad habit. So for bad habits, you want to make it invisible, and make the cue invisible, and make it unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying. And again, these are like a toolbox for thinking about what can we practically do on a daily basis for building good habits and breaking bad ones.
So obvious.
So one way to think about this is with a strategy that I call environment design. And the idea is just to restructure your physical environment to make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad habits invisible. So let me give you an example of both. These are 2 personal examples. So I realized that for most of my life I brushed my teeth twice a day, but I wouldn't floss consistently. And when I looked at the habit, there were 2 issues. And one of the problems was the floss was just tucked away in the drawer in the bathroom. I wouldn't see it. And so because it wasn't obvious, sometimes I just would forget. The second thing, which sounds kind of silly, but I didn't like the feeling of wrapping floss around my fingers. It was just like uncomfortable. And so anyway, I took the floss out of the drawer, bought a little bowl, and got some of those pre-made flossers and put them in the bowl and set it right next to my toothbrush. And now I brush my teeth, put the toothbrush down, pick a flosser up, do it right away. It's obvious, and that's pretty much all I needed to do to build that habit. Now I've been doing it for, 5 years and haven't really had to think about it.
This is the most important thing, I think. There's a lot of people, my friend Dan Buettner included, who don't hold a lot of confidence and belief in a single human being's ability to implement positive behavior changes with sustainable long-term results. It's just, that's why there's so many self-help books. People struggle with weight and fitness and, you name it, profession, like all of these things. It's so hard. But the best way to fundamentally address these things is to change your environment so that it's conducive to the healthy choice. So whether it's flossing your teeth or reimagining what an urban landscape is so that it's incentivizing people to ride their bikes and not drive cars and not drink sodas but drink water, like structural systemic changes in our environment that make the healthy choice, the productive choice,
he ain't answering.
not only the obvious choice but in
Let me
some
see.
cases
I'm gonna
the
see
only
if I'm
choice
calling
or
one
the
time.
choice
I'll let
that
you
is
know.
at arm's length at all times. And that goes with eradicating
Alright.
the unhealthy choices, removing those from arm's reach so that they become more difficult to
Alright, bet.
access.
Yes, it's huge. I mean, imagine the impact of living in an environment or working in an environment where there are 100 little
Yeah, let
things
me
like
call
that
him.
that are all kind of nudging you in the right
Okay.
direction or nudging you away from the wrong direction. Here's another example for breaking a bad habit. So again, here you just invert it rather than make it obvious, make it invisible. I've noticed that if I buy a 6-pack of beer and I put it in the front of the fridge, like either in the door or like right in the front of the shelf, I'll open it up and I'll have one each night just because it's there. But if I take it and I put it in the back of the fridge, like the lowest shelf all the way in the back where I can't really see it when I open the door, sometimes it'll sit there for like a month. And so it's interesting, I'm like, well, do I want a beer or not? Because in a way I do, but only if it's really presented to me.
Right, you moved it like 5 inches.
Yes,
do?
really, seriously, it's probably like 12 inches
think
back.
you can send me the
Well, I
car
can tell
right
you
now?
as a recovering alcoholic, in my drinking days, that would not have been a barrier for
It's
me.
the same one?
I would have had to take more extreme measures.
Same pin and
So,
everything?
That actually
Send me the
is
pin
a
again.
good point, which is that many of these strategies that I talk
Oh,
about in the
421.
book
All
are
right,
very
bet.
effective for good habits and
All right,
bad
bet.
habits.
Good
I
looking.
would just agree not to use that term,
Yeah.
but not necessarily for true addictions.
Yeah, and this is something I wanted to really
All
get
right, bet.
into with you, which is the difference, the qualitative difference between a quote unquote bad habit and something that would qualify as an addiction. I think that line gets blurred, and certainly it's a spectrum. But I think there's a very different approach that you need to take when somebody is truly, falling prey to addictive behavior patterns versus something that's just habituated.
Yeah, so we'll get back to the 4 laws of behavior changes.
Yeah, by the end of this, we will go through them. But,
So, the technical definition for an addiction, and by the way, I don't consider myself an expert on addiction, is a behavior that you continue to repeat despite negative consequences. So you know that it's bad for you, you know it's not serving you, but you still can't stop yourself from doing it. And those, I do agree, it's probably on a spectrum. So, on one side of the spectrum, you have a behavior that you do just one time. And then the more that you repeat it, you kind of shift down, and then at some point, maybe you cross over this threshold and you get to a habit. And then if you go even further, you've got behaviors that you keep doing again and again, but you don't learn from them.
Hello.
And we'll call that an addiction. And so it's kind of like the feedback loop is broken. You go through the cue,
Yeah, I
you
really
have the
just need some
craving,
stuff
you
like
take the response,
to
but
cook
then instead of
for
there being a reward, instead of it serving you in some way, really all it does is
maybe
just
some
satisfy the craving, and but it's not good for the rest of your life.
fruit.
the feedback loop isn't necessarily
I said
broken.
this
It's
thing,
just that it doesn't matter.
I would say
The
give me
cravings
some
who's addicted is typically.
mango.
I mean, there's again, denial is a spectrum as well.
Yeah.
But on some level, whether conscious or unconscious, they're aware
In the
that they're
frozen
destroying
food
their
area, if
lives,
they
but
got
it simply
anything that's like
doesn't matter. They're still going
the little
to
quick meals
pursue this path of destruction, no matter where it
or
takes
something
them.
like that.
And I can
If
just tell
not,
you from my own personal experience,
Just something you think
as somebody
that
who,
I guess.
who
And you can
has
get
always
some
prided themselves on
wherever you
having a large capacity to endure work,
Jeremy.
somebody who has a reservoir of self-will, who had been successful in many ways by virtue of a strong work ethic. I was confounded and brought to my knees time and time again by
See
my
what the number on the
inability to
fruit start
leverage
with.
these
If
skills
it start with
that I
9,
thought were
does it
my
start with 9?
secret weapons to this problem. And the more that I applied self-will,
Don't get it.
determination,
No, never mind.
decision-making power, my ability to
shit.
dedicate myself to
Yeah,
a goal,
that's
the
horrible.
deeper that hole got. Like I had to completely
I don't know, like
upend
get some
how I saw
maybe
the
some
world
turkey or something.
and come to this place of not just acceptance and breaking that veil of denial, but also surrender.
If
Like
not, just get the stuff
understanding
you
that I
was
was
gonna get.
powerless over this thing was really the first base of trying to figure out a new trajectory forward. And it's very counterintuitive and weird,
Yeah, you can get that.
and it doesn't make sense to most people, unless you've gone through this process, it's like a letting go as
You said
opposed
they
to like
$15. Just get it.
like
Just
some
get-
sort of
yeah, just
driven
get one pack.
willingness to like
I
fight it.
mean,
So it was like
What else?
you could apply determination and grit to any other
Any
area.
other
of your life.
area of my life, I've had success using those skills.
But for some reason,
And this,
with this,
yeah, it made it worse and worse and worse and worse.
yeah, that's
And it
fascinating.
further and further isolated me from everybody else because I thought I can solve this. I don't need help. I'm going to do this on my, all these other areas of my life have worked out when I use this strategy. There's no reason why this strategy won't work here, and it just destroyed me.
So, I mean, obviously addiction is very complicated, and I don't
I
know
don't
that,
eat pork. Hell no.
so I just made the distinction of the strategies in the book I think are really good for bad habits, not necessarily for addictions, although I don't think that it would hurt to use those strategies for addiction, but I don't know that it's going to be like, oh, magically solve
It's
the
in
problem.
the code
Well,
section.
it may help with the denial part at a very minimum.
Yeah. So, there's a secret chapter.
If not,
to the
just
book
get what
that's
you're
not
gonna
included
get
in
and
the
just
final
say,
manuscript, but that
I
you
guess
can
so.
get at
Probably just
atomichabits.com.
order
And
it.
it's called The Biology of Bad Behavior.
or something.
And it discusses what scientists are doing to
sandwiches?
kind of rewire the brain of addicts. So some
How
of
much
them
is
are
them?
pills, like cocaine addicts are using a drug called baclofen that was originally developed for back spasms that
13?
some addicts say when they start to take it, suddenly their cravings and
that's
addiction have vanished more or less overnight.
Or if they got the
I don't know that
turkey
it
one.
works for all of them, and that's kind of the story with a lot of these drugs for addiction right now. Is that
It
some
said it
people
got
have
yogurt
really amazing results,
in
but
it.
not every patient does. Then there's a second strategy. It has been National Geographic covered it last year. It's starting to be used in Italy, and I think it's making its way around the world. Where it's
Yeah.
this TMS machine, this magnetic stimulation for the brain, and essentially as I understand it,
Do the turkey one with the yogurt. Them.
is responsible
If they,
for
yeah, them cool.
decision
Okay,
mechanisms
that's cool
and
though.
your ability
The
to
chicken
resist
was cool.
temptation. And in addicts, they
No.
find that this particular area is kind of
And then-
deactivated to a certain degree, and so when
trying to
craving
think, right.
rises, you have trouble resisting. And so you'll go in for this magnetic stimulation, and effectively they place the magnet over that portion of that region of the brain, stimulate the neurons there with some electrical impulses, and people walk out and they feel like they don't have cravings anymore. It's kind of crazy. So I don't know where this is going to go.
They got almond milk
and I'm
or
very
like
wary to say that
some
like,
type
this
of
is a
milk.
magic trick. And
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is interesting, and
Give me
it's gonna
just
be
one
really
of
cool to
almond
see
milk.
how this
One of
stuff
the
plays
almond
out.
milk.
There's all kinds of amazing studies happening with psychedelics at the moment.
Do they got a smaller one? I don't need all that.
But I always kind of default to this, fundamental
Alright, yeah, that's
perspective
cool.
that,
Just get that one.
addiction is fueled, as Gabor Mate would say, from some kind of
Or no, I can
trauma
wait.
or some
I can wait.
psychological framework where
I
a
just-
person
unless
feels
you need some-
broken in some regard and is compelled to engage in that destructive addictive behavior as a means of
Jeremy, I can wait on
change,
the almond
right?
milk.
Which is what we were talking about earlier. So you can eliminate the craving and eliminate the behavior or the substance, but that
What about the wings?
predisposition
What they got?
remains, and it will continue to find another avenue to satisfy itself with some kind of behavior or
No, I need some almond
whatever
food. I was thinking about
to
getting that.
salve
but-
whatever that wound is or that sense of incompleteness.
Nah, I'll just order some stuff on
inadequacy,
Instacart
or
tomorrow.
whatever it is that is really the driver behind
You know.
the addictive behavior, because the substance or the behavior is the solution to the problem. And you can until it becomes the problem itself, and you can remove that, but you're still left with
What
that
kind of
fundamental
Problem.
disposition that needs to get addressed.
do you feel like running or writing has
They don't got no other,
something
like-
or something else has been the thing that's
Well,
helped solve that?
Different ones.
yeah,
The
they're
flavor.
helpful and
Yeah.
they're curative in some regard, but ultimately they're not the solution.
See if they got some
And,
ramen.
I've been sober for a long time.
Like the real ramen.
12 Steps, The Secret Society, that's how I
Okay.
got sober. and
I'ma just
stayed
order
sober. I'm
tomorrow.
still
Alright.
a very, very active member
Alright, yeah,
of
that's
that
good.
program, and
Alright.
that, to this day, is still my number one priority. And the minute I start to lose sight of that, or forget that, or take it for
They got
granted,
what?
is when I start to lapse back into
Oreo sandwiches.
that realm.
Oh,
And there's no success either. And this is something you might not understand well. Like,
That's ice
there's
cream?
no, like, oh, I conquered that, now I'm moving on. to
Oh,
this.
them
Addiction,
slaps.
it's
them.
either
You
regressing
ever
or
had them?
regressing with every thought you entertained or
Bro,
behavior that you engage in.
wait.
So be very mindful of it and engage
Oh my
in
god.
behaviors and the activities
Yeah.
that keep
But
it
I
at
need
bay
food,
in
Tess.
order
I'm
to
gonna
be
fuck
productive.
around and just get to buying a
I
whole
don't
bunch
go
of
around thinking about
bullshit.
drinking or using drugs very often. It rarely
You heard
occurs
me?
to me, but I have a whole battery of other negative behavior patterns
No,
that
it's
will
alright. I don't need
manifest
this.
all kinds of character defects that I wouldn't qualify as addictions, but are habits that, you know, I'm constantly
Alright, just get the little
trying
stuff
to
that I
alter
got right
or
now.
change.
And when you go to Walmart, give me just some chips or something.
This is kind of an interesting intersection with the second law, to bring it back to some of those. Because, so the first law we talked about, make it obvious, and doing some
What is that?
design changes. The second law is about making it attractive.
Stir fry?
And
Or
what
that's
I mean by that is, when you interpret a behavior, when you
see if you can find the ramen, and that's all that I'm asking of
as
you.
being attractive,
You see any ramen?
as being something you should move toward, then you have a reason to perform
Like
the
with
action,
vegetables?
and you're motivated to do it. So,
Alright, it's good.
in
Don't
many
worry about it.
cases, the behaviors that are motivating to us, that are attractive to us, are dependent on the people that we are around.
Don't worry.
So, one way to think about this is that we are all members of tribes. Some of the tribes are big, some of them are small. Like, big ones might be what it means to be American,
Yeah.
or what it means to be French, or something like that. And small ones could be what it means to
Yeah,
be
that's
a
cool.
neighbor on your street, or a member of your local CrossFit gym, or a volunteer at your local high school, or whatever. But all of these tribes, large and small, have a set of shared expectations that for what it means to be part of the group. And when you belong to that tribe, when you have friends there, when you feel like you want to fit in with that group, habits that align with the shared expectations of the tribe are very attractive, and you want to do them. And habits that go against the grain of the shared expectations are very unattractive. And so, one of the ways to make habits more attractive is to join a group where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. To be with a crew where the habits that you want to build are just normal and everyday for you.
Yeah, I mean that's really an extrapolation of the first law. You're extending your physical.
Just let me know the total.
You're creating a productive physical environment, and now you're extending that to your interpersonal environment. So you're surrounding yourself with a physical environment that's conducive to the healthy
what?
behavior, the healthy habit, and now you're surrounding yourself with the people that reinforce
I'm
that
good.
and make
I got
it more
water.
difficult for you
I'm
to
good.
behave otherwise.
I mean, society leans heavily on all of this. You know, like, I mean, there's a bunch of habits that people do each day you don't even think about. Like, you get onto the elevator and you turn around and face the front, or you,
Yeah.
you,
Made that role anyway.
yeah, I know, right? You go to a job interview,
Yeah.
and you wear a suit and a tie, or a dress, or something nice. There's no reason it has to be like that, right? Like, you could face the back of the elevator, you could wear a bathing suit to a job interview, but we don't do that because it violates those shared expectations. It goes against the grain of the group. And so many of our choices are like that. And in many ways, when we're young, a lot of our habits are not chosen, they're inherited. They're passed down to us by whatever group that we're a part of. And then, you know, part of the process of becoming an adult is you grow up and you get into your 20s and 30s and you decide, these groups that I inherited, these behaviors that I inherit, are these the ones that serve me, or these are the ones that I want? And then, you know, you kind of go through the process of changing that. And in many ways, asking people to change their habits is actually asking them to change their tribe. And that can be hard, especially if you have to do it on your own. You know, I mean, that's one of it helps to have a new tribe to go to, because if people have to choose between having the habits they want and being alone, or having the habits they don't want and being with people, having friends, belonging, we'd often rather be wrong with the crowd than right by ourselves.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing this being played out culturally in this interesting moment that we're having right now, where across all forms of social media, the things that people are saying in the political sphere are as much signaling to their own group to reaffirm their position within their tribe as they are an attempt to convert somebody from another tribe, which doesn't work generally. But it's interesting to see that social dynamic writ large, because it's at such a heightened state right now, but it's really no different than the guy who is hanging out with his gym buddies and wants to be part of that crowd and really wed himself into that subculture and identify with that and be approved of by that group.
I wrote an article recently called "Why Facts Don't Change Our Minds," and humans need a reasonably accurate view of the world, of the facts, to survive. Like if you couldn't accurately see where the car was moving down the road and then you walked out, you'd get hit by one and wouldn't pass your jeans along and so on. And so you need to have some reasonable baseline. But within that, there's actually a fair bit of flexibility. And so people don't just hold beliefs because they're true and accurate.
You gotta make them like
factual.
insomnia.
They also hold beliefs because they can help them belong. Because they signal to their social allies that, hey, I belong to this tribe. And in many cases, being abandoned by the tribe is more of a death sentence than having a belief that is slightly inaccurate, that especially one that doesn't impact your personal life right now. And so then we fast forward to modern society, and you get this manifesting in all kinds of weird ways.
Right. All right. Well, on this idea of making it attractive and surrounding yourself with the people that affirm and approve of and encourage the kind of behavior that you're trying to manifest within yourself. It seems to me there are two kind of operating systems here. There is the positive reinforcement that you get, the approval mechanism, but there's also the negative accountability, right? Like because if you stray, then you're going to be held accountable for that. In the same way, you're going to get a pat on the back for towing the line.
You want me to send it to
or
you?
being part of the group.
Right.
Is there one that you've seen that is more powerful than the other? Are they both necessary? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Jonathan Haidt at I think he's at NYU. He has some interesting research on this, and I don't know that he's performing himself, but he was the one that I saw present about the importance of punishments and consequences in societies in general, and like we need to know that there is a punishment for breaking the law or something in order for people to stay on course.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure exactly how that applies to habits. My gut reaction is that you probably need both in the long run, but that
I'm finna send it to you. My
extreme
phone phone.
punishments and consequences, those like fear-driven consequences rather than rewards, really get people to move in the intermediate, in the short term, and the belonging and the positive rewards are more likely to sustain in the long
over
run.
time.
So I would say that's generally how I would bucket them.
I think it was Tim Ferriss who came up with that case study experiment of creating a gym where I think the idea was you pay all the money up front for the year and they take a picture of you without your shirt on, looking terrible. And if you miss a day or whatever, like then that image goes on social media, so there's sort of like this stick, being more powerful than the carrot, at least in the short term.
I've heard about ones where they, you pay like, I don't know what the exact number would be. Maybe it's like $150 a month. And then every time you go to the gym, you get $5. And so if you go every day for 30 days, you pay nothing. And if you go 3 days a week, you get to, that's kind of similar incentive. In the book, I think I have an example of this guy, Thomas Frank. He's this entrepreneur in Colorado, and he wanted to build the habit of waking up earlier. And so he created a little automated Twitter post that would go out at 6 a.m. every morning, or 6:05. I think he wanted to wake up at 6 a.m. And so if he didn't get up at 6, at 6:05, it would post to Twitter and say, I'm not up right now because I'm lazy. The first 5 people to respond to this, I'll PayPal you $25.
Yeah.
And so then every day he'd wake up at 6, and the first thing he'd do is push that back to the next day.
Yeah, that's ingenious. I mean, you definitely would wake up, if you had some horrible tweet going out that reflected poorly on you. And the other example that comes to mind is I think it's Tim Ferriss as well, which was if you fail, like a certain amount of money goes to an organization that you despise. Right?
There are a variety of services that do that now. One's called BeMinder, another one's called Stick. I think it's STICKK. But yeah, you put all right, my goal is to run this half marathon, and if I don't train 3 days a week, then I'm putting $500 on the line, and you committed, and you can't get the money back unless your friend releases it to you.
Right.
And if you don't do your training, the money goes to a charity that you hate or whatever.
Yeah. Cool. All right. The next law is easy.
Okay, so
Explain that.
make it easy. Many of our behaviors are just about convenience. So I've started doing this thing recently where I'll leave my phone in another room outside of my office for until lunch each day. So I get a block of 3 or 4 hours in the morning where it's just not around. Now, these numbers keep going up every year. We just get more and more addicted to our phones. But the average adult checks their phone over 150 times a day now. And if the phone is next to me on the desk, I'm like everybody else. I look at it every 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. But when I keep it outside of my office, I have this home office. All I have to do is walk up the stairs and go to a different room. It's like 45 seconds away. But I never go do it, which is fascinating to me because it's like, well, I was checking my phone every 5 minutes if it was next to me. So you would think I wanted to do it. But I never wanted it bad enough to walk 45 seconds upstairs. And modern society has done this weird thing where so many of the behaviors and technologies are so frictionless now, they're so convenient, that we find ourselves doing them just with an inkling of desire. We don't actually really want them, but they're so easy that we'll just fill space with them.
Yeah.
And so this law, the third law, is about trying to get that to work for you when it comes to building good habits. So reducing the number of steps between you and the good habits, and increasing the number of steps between you and the bad ones. So you want to make it difficult for that. And one of the metaphors I like to use is like a garden hose. So imagine you have a hose that's like bent in the middle, and there's a little bit of water trickling out. If you want to get more water through the hose, then you have two options. The first is you could just crank up the valve and force water through. But that increases friction and increases tension in the system. The other option is just to unfold the bend and let the water flow through naturally. And that also gets more water to flow through, but it reduces tension, reduces friction. And so much of the conversation about building better habits and achieving peak performance is all the mental equivalent of cranking up the valve. You need to work harder, you need to have grit, persevere, hustle, grind. And it's not that those qualities are bad, it's just that it increases tension in the system. And what you really want is to create a setup where it's easy to do the things that pay off in the long run, and you have the mentality of, I'm the type of person who will work hard. So you want to reduce the tension where
a more sustainable, gentle solution than, rise and grind versus remove these things that are in your way every single day that actually are pretty easy to remove or create distance between to make it easier for you to do the thing that you're trying to do.
You're really trying to prime your environment to make the default action easier. And sometimes you can do that with environment design stuff that we talked about earlier. Other times you can do it by taking actions ahead of time that pay off in the future. So like, say you're trying to build a better sleep habit. There are a variety of one-time actions you could take today that make it easier to get better sleep every night after this. You could test different mattresses and see which one leads to the best night's sleep and buy that one. You could purchase blackout curtains so that your room is dark. You could buy earmuffs or earplugs so that you can sleep more soundly. Get a sleep mask so that you can sleep on the road or in hotels. There are some of those things like the chili pad or some of the other stuff that will cool the temperature of the bed to a more ideal rate.
Or you can get a tent and sleep in your backyard like I do.
There you go. You could sleep outside. You could also buy, there's this little device called an outlet timer. And it costs like $10 on Amazon. And my friend Nir Ayal, he bought one and he plugged it into it's like an adapter. You plug it into the outlet and then you plug the device into the timer. And so he plugged his internet router into it and set the timer for 10 p.m. each night, and it would kill the power to the internet router at 10. So then it's like, well, Netflix doesn't work. I can't browse the web. It's time for everybody to go to bed.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so imagine if you just did, I just listed off 7 or 8 things there, but imagine if you did 5 of those. Well, now suddenly you're in an environment where getting better sleep as a habit is much easier. And those are all just one-time choices that paid off for you in the future. And there's a bunch of stuff like that, depending on the habit. Finance habits are a good example. Automated savings or automatic deposit into your 401k or stuff like that. You want to make this brainless so that you can, as much as possible, so that you have the energy left over to do the hard thing when you need to.
It's weird how we've created this world where now we have to spend so much energy trying to create systems to
Combat the systems
yeah,
we've
to
created.
override our DNA and impulses to engage in these things that we think we've created to make our lives better, and yet at the same time are creating all these downstream problems. I mean, you know, the obvious candidate, the cell phone. It's like this thing is so scientifically devised and designed to captivate us and trigger all of those, you know, impulses that we so deeply seek, that you can't blame anyone from. I mean, it's like you're scrolling and you're like, I didn't even know I was scrolling. You know, it becomes so bred into us. And now we have to go way out of our way and buy all these other devices to protect ourselves. I just saw the other day, I don't know if you saw this, somebody came up with these special sunglasses that you can put on, and it makes all screens look blank.
No, really?
Yeah. So when you're wearing them,
Is
you
it
actually
just
can't
like
read anything
white
on a
or
digital
what?
screen. Yeah, I think it just makes everything look white.
Oh man.
I'm like, that's really cool, and it's also insane that we have had to
To
come up
invent
with
that,
that.
right,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Some poor person has spent 1,000 hours
like
building this company.
In 1820, like this is not what they're worried about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, this is just a good argument for simplicity and minimalism. You know, I think being a minimalist, which I don't know that I consider myself a staunch minimalist, but I definitely adhere to some of the principles. It's not about having the least number of things, it's about having the optimal number of things. And many of the items that we choose or are surrounded by in daily life, they give us way more than the optimal number. Now we're being bombarded by notifications, text messages, and all kinds of stimuli that we're just fighting things that we didn't have to fight before.
Yeah. It's getting really tricky, and it's weird how the things that foment these bad habits, like the cell phone or you know whatever app that is your favorite app, like the amount of money and science that's gone into, or video games, right? Like it's just all about like keeping you wed to it for as long as possible. Why is it that we can't channel all of that scientific genius and put that into things that are producing good habits instead?
Yeah.
Right? Like all of that, you go to a Vegas casino, it's completely orchestrated to like keep you there as long as possible, right? It's an environment that is promoting a bad habit. Why can't we create environments with that amount of intentionality and money and science into promoting good habits?
Yeah, I mean, capitalism, I think, is the overriding force here. You know, like it's not just casinos. Airports, for example, there are really well-paid airport designers that will come in to lay out a new terminal that will specifically decide where the walkways should be, so that you weave through the maximum amount of stores and pass the right restaurants at the right time, and to spend the most money while you're there. And so anyway, my point is just that capitalism is the overriding incentive for the people who do this stuff. And so the person who can figure out how to make a lot of money from good habits will have a strong reason to do it. But until people figure that out, you end up kind of... We work for these companies that do it during the day, and then as individuals, we want to redesign it for ourselves at night, right? Like all these YouTube execs are like, my kids are not watching YouTube,
Right.
Which is, a
Yeah,
fascinating
Steve Jobs didn't let his kids have an iPad, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think, and we need more of the. I just read the other day as well. There was somewhere. I think it might be Russia. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but someplace where when you go to the train station or the subway, instead of having, if you did like 10 burpees or 10
I think I saw
press-ups
this.
or something
It's
like
Russia.
that,
You do 30
you get a
squats and you
free
get a ticket. Yeah.
We need more of that. Right?
That's great.
I know. So anyway, all right.
Okay, I have one more thing I want to say about Make It Easy. So, the simplest way to do this is to scale a habit down. So in the book, I talk about this thing I call the 2-minute rule. And the idea is you just take whatever habit you're trying to build and you scale it down to the first 2 minutes. And I had a reader who did something similar to this. He ended up losing over 100 pounds. And one of the ways that he did it was he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. So it sounds kind of crazy, but for the first 6 weeks, he went and he showed up and he did like half an exercise, and then he would leave and go home. And to most people, they hear that and they're like, well, it's kind of ridiculous. You're wasting your time. You're not actually going to get in shape from that. But the point is, he was mastering the art of showing up. And a habit has to be established before it can be improved. You know, like until you become the person who shows up every day, there's nothing to optimize. We're so worried about figuring out the best diet plan or the best business idea or the optimal way to, boost my bench press or whatever. We search for all these perfect plans, but we don't do the thing that is fundamental to all of it, which is just showing up. And the 2-minute rule is one way to do that. You want to do 30 minutes of yoga? Well, let's translate that into take out your yoga mat. Or if you want to read 30 books a year, let's translate that into read 1 page. But whatever the first 2 minutes are of the behavior, scale it down, master that, master the art of showing up, make it as easy as possible to get started. And then once you become that person and you're going to the gym every day or you're reading 1 page every day, well, now you have options. Now you have choices and you can upgrade and improve from there.
Yeah. Two observations on that. The first is it goes directly to something you talk about all the time, which is focusing on and optimizing the starting line versus the finish line, right? Like you think about the finish line, we set goals that are all about the finish line, and we overlook how important the starting line is. And the more we can have in the back of our mind that destination that we're aiming to go towards, but the more we can root ourselves in what's required to be at that starting line, then it becomes digestible and doable and sustainable.
You don't start the race, you can't finish it.
Yeah,
right? So,
right.
People are all worried about the outcome. Everybody wants to, whatever the outcome is, run a marathon, earn 6 figures, lose 30 pounds. It's all finish line focused, but you have to standardize before you optimize. You have to make it the standard in your life before you have the chance to optimize it and turn it into something more.
Yeah. And I think it goes to the second point I was going to make. It goes to this idea that I think a lot of people, they really overestimate what they can or should do in a single day, and they completely underestimate what they're capable of in a long-term window. And I don't mean 6 months. I mean 5 years, 10 years. But when you overestimate the daily routine, it ultimately leads to burnout for most people because it's not sustainable, right? And if you can narrow that down and put it into these small chunks like you're talking about,
I got sick out of nowhere.
and create a
was
situation in which you
this morning, it
habituate
literally feel
gradually,
like how it be on a hot day in the
and you
wintertime.
create
Like,
a lifestyle
that's
that's
what I'm like.
oriented
Something
around
gotta be going
being
on.
able to
I'm like, I can
maintain
damn near
it
put on some
and
gloves and a
optimize on
scarf
that.
right now.
That's where you're going to see
And
the
it's been
results.
colder
being
at night. It'll
outlined.
never be
I
like
think that's
this.
true, and it's
So,
hard. I mentioned this in chapter 1 of the book. It's
I've been
hard to
seeing the
feel
animals
that
that
on a
go
daily
crazy.
basis.
Yeah.
Like I use the metaphor.
A
It's
whole
kind of like
bunch
heating
of-
up an ice cube.
I would say in the
like
ocean they've been going
you're in a
crazy,
room.
but they're
It's
saying
cold,
that it's
you see
too
your
hot
breath,
in the
you've got
ocean,
this
so
ice
they
cube sitting on
move
the table in front of you. It's
to
like
like
25 degrees.
there's gonna be animals
You
they
heat the
said
room
coming
it's
like
26,
up north.
27,
Like here?
28,
Yeah, that ain't
29,
never
30.
been here before,
Nothing's
but
happened.
because the
Ice cube's
ocean
still
getting
sitting
so
there.
hot,
31.
so
And then
that's what they say.
32,
But
1
yeah,
degree
it gotta be
shift,
something
just
like
like all
that.
the other ones before it, and suddenly you hit this phase
wanna
transition,
work
the ice
hard.
cube melts.
Yeah.
And it's not that life is always like that, but it often feels like that. Like people put in a little bit of work, they
And so-
scale it down
a
to
com-
behavior,
a
and they think,
comment, huh?
there's nothing happening
No,
here.
bro,
It's
I
like
was-
seeing
you
an
can
ice
look.
cube go
No,
from
a
25 to
comment that I
27
had
degrees.
read,
And so then
it
you
was
get,
something that
you feel
I
like
thought
you
I
gotta
was
do
tripping.
more,
Somebody
and I
was
need to
like,
try harder, I
the
need a bigger
birds
goal,
just
I
been
need to be
chirping
more
like
ambitious,
crazy.
'cause then
I
I'll
Like,
thought I
they
was
be up
tripping.
late as hell?
Yes.
Like,
I thought I was
told Shannon
tripping. I'm
that
like,
3 months or
Ain't
6
no
am I
months.
fucking birds
tripping?
supposed to be
Yeah.
fucking chirping at
It's
12
not like
a.m.
complaining about heating an ice cube
I
from
thought I was
25 to 30
tripping. Then
degrees and
when
not
I seen
melting
that
yet.
comment, I'm like,
Not
I
melting
knew
yet.
I wasn't tripping.
They be
the work
up.
wasn't
I'm
being
like,
wasted, it's just
yeah.
stored, like you, and
I ain't never, and people be
that is a
thinking like,
hallmark of any process that
oh, no, you just
compounds,
tripping,
which is
but
the
the
most
birds
important
ain't
thing.
never been
Yeah,
up
like,
at no 11 at night.
one
just
thing about nature,
casually
like,
chilling.
It's really hard to
when
feel
something ain't right, I
Feels
don't
like
know.
nothing's
They
happening.
gonna
Feels like
tell
you're
you,
wasting
yeah.
your time, and that's
the animals be
why it's so
knowing
important.
this shit ain't right.
I'm like, okay, it's just
To
birds, but I'm like, I
understand that this is
never
about identity.
like saw this
Because
before.
if you're only
They be sleep.
focused,
Like,
then
I
you're
never
not going to
heard
be able
no
to stay
birds.
in it because you'll
Like,
get
it was
going
dissuaded
crazy.
or
I'm like, what the
disappointed or
It's
whatever.
chirping.
But
They
if
probably
this
up
is
talking.
fundamentally you made a decision that
Oh, yeah, we need to find somewhere to go. These humans don't know what's going on.
then you're not so
Nope.
wed to
That's
day
crazy.
in, day out results.
Yeah,
You're not tabulating a spreadsheet every day about.
And then another thing, well, this ain't really nothing
So this is
big,
maybe
but
a
I'm
good
just
time
now
to
noticing
bring up
it.
the
Like,
fourth law of behavior
I've been
change,
hearing like
because this is a
owls.
perfect example of it.
Oh, yeah.
So the
Like,
fourth
I'm
law is
just
make
now
it
noticing that
satisfying.
was
And what you really
a
need
owl
is to make it
sound,
immediately
and I've been
satisfying.
hearing this so
And the
much. And
ultimate
I asked somebody like, "What is
manifestation
that
of
noise?" And they're like,
is
"Oh,
the
it's an owl." I'm
reinforcement of your
like,
desired identity. If
When they be like
yeah,
that.
are
they
focused
be doing
on,
it for so
losing 30
long.
pounds and you go run for a
And
month
they
and
be
you're like, well, my
like,
body hasn't
I was
changed.
usually
You know,
do it
it's
at
the
night.
same.
I be
You don't
hearing
have
them
any
in the day.
rewards to seek.
Well, they do it both.
But if you're
so,
focused on becoming the type of
Yeah,
person who
right.
runs 3 times a week, as soon as you step out the door and take 2 steps,
Gotta
you're
stay
reinforcing
prayed
that
up. I don't
identity.
know what's
So you
gonna
can
happen,
feel
but
good in the moment.
And you heard about that
And even if
Project
it's in a small
25
way,
stuff?
that's
Yeah.
crucial for
I
getting
didn't even.
consistent.
I
And
looked
this
it
is
up. I
something
didn't
refer
even
to as the
like
cardinal
see
rule
what all
of
they
behavior
was
change,
doing,
which
but
is
I
that
heard. I seen
behaviors
somebody
that
make a
are
post.
immediately rewarded
Yeah.
get repeated.
Like, I'm trying not to
Behaviors that are
like
immediately
be into
punished get
TikTok.
avoided.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Like,
you
that's
gotta
gonna be getting me
speed, how
paranoid and like
quickly
nothing ever
you
be happening.
respond
Like
to
people just
it.
be talking.
You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
like
But I think I'm gonna
if
read up
something
on
feels
it and
good right after you
actually,
finish it,
I think I'm
it's
reading
like a
read up
positive
on it and do
emotional
an
signal
essay
to
on
your
that.
brain.
Oh
It's like,
yeah.
hey,
Because
this is
That'd
good.
be
You
sweet.
should repeat
our
this
next
again next
essay
time.
is
And
like
so,
we
in that
gotta
sense,
find
positive
something and
emotions
like
cultivate
disagree on it
habits
or
and
something.
negative
So
emotions
is your
destroy
class
them.
is gonna be
And you
long,
really
like
want
both
to find a way
semesters?
to
Yeah,
feel
it's
Oh,
all
yeah.
and feel
summer.
successful
That's
as soon as you finish.
Yeah, that's interesting. How important
My
is
class is in this week. I'm probably gonna take some.
momentum in all of this? Because I know that as diligent as I am about my training
But it's
and
like
my
the news.
working
They don't
out,
even tell you shit. though.
Yeah,
I think
I ain't
most
trying to
people
watch
would
the
agree
bullshit.
if you're in the
They don't-
habit of like going to the gym every day and
They ain't gonna tell us no real
you're seeing
shit.
results, you're part of that community, and then something happens, you got a business trip or some whatever, like some wrench gets thrown in your plans and you miss a day or 2 or maybe 3 days, then it becomes so hard to go back when it was so easy to go every single day prior to that. And that's where you see people completely fall off the wagon, and then 6 months goes by, a year goes by, and they haven't gone once.
Yeah.
So psychologically, there's something very strange that's going on with that makes that momentum something so special and mystical that really needs to be like respected and cared for because it's so powerful.
It's kind of like Newton's laws applied to habits. You know, objects that are in motion stay in motion. Objects at rest stay at rest. There's a wise lesson there in what you're mentioning, which is first of all habit streaks end at some point. You know, like everybody slips up at some point. And the mantra that I like to keep in mind for that, for myself as much as anybody else, is never miss twice. So if I work out at the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I miss on Friday because of a business trip or whatever, then I need to put all my energy into making sure I get in there on Monday. I don't want to miss twice in a row. It's pretty much never the first mistake that ruins you. It's like the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows.
Uh-huh.
So if you can get back on track quickly, I think I have a line in the book, something like, missing once is a mistake, missing twice is the start of a new habit.
Yeah, because then it creates its own negative momentum.
Right, yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, it's like what's the next right action, you know? And if you are identity based, you'll say, well, you know, I'm a writer, so I write. This is what I do.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't take 2 days off.
I mean, diets are like the most common example
Right.
of this. What we're really talking about here is this kind of all or nothing mentality that people have, where it's like, well, I did the diet for 5 days, but then my friends wanted to go to happy hour and I binge ate a little bit, and so I guess I'm just not made for
Yeah, I
this.
guess it's just too hard,
Yeah.
so I'm just giving up instead of just like, well, you know what? The next time I'm going to sit down to eat, I'm going to make a healthy choice.
Exactly.
And maybe it's not perfect, but at least it's not Burger King.
I wish I hadn't binge ate, but never missed twice. So I'm going to make sure that next time I get back on track and eat a healthy meal.
Yeah.
So I do think momentum plays a role there. There's also a second note about momentum, and this comes back to like video games and some of the stuff we talked about earlier, and to that cardinal rule of behavior change that I mentioned. A lot of times momentum is built on the speed of the feedback cycle. So we have so far in this conversation been talking about habits kind of from like this larger macro level of like a habit like going to the gym or writing or something like that. But really, biologically speaking, this process of those 4 stages, your brain is going through this endlessly and all the time and in the fraction of a second. So, you know, take something like turning on the light switch. You walk into the room, cue, the room is dark. Craving, I predict that if I turn the light on, it'll be better and reduce uncertainty, and I want to be able to see. Response, I flip on the light switch. Reward, the room is now lit and I can see. And all of that happens in, you know, a half a second. And so your brain is going through those cycles all the time. So in a sense, you're kind of always going through these little behaviors, and those little microcycles can build momentum as you go through something if they're tight enough and you have signals of progress. You're getting positive feedback, and this is what video games are incredible at. As you go through any level, there are little counters in the corner. Your score is going up. You're collecting more rubies and coins. Every time you grab a power up or a weapon or something, there's a little jingle or chime. Even the pitter patter of steps as you like advance through the scene is a signal that you're making positive progress. And what video games can do that's very hard to do in daily life is they can keep you right on the edge so that you're challenged just enough but still making progress. You know, like if you are really killing it on a certain level, they start to take away some of those power-ups and give you more difficult challenges to face. If you're struggling, they'll give you more coins and rubies and, you know, like help you along a little bit. And so they are always making sure that you're making just enough progress through the level while still being challenged enough to be engaged. And that is like I mean, this has been shown with research, variable rewards and keeping you kind of on this razor's edge of difficulty is one of the peak ways to maintain motivation and momentum and want to stay engaged with a habit. And technology makes it easier for us to do that, which is one reason those behaviors and games are so addictive.
Yeah, I mean, it's ingenious. It's just being channeled for a less than productive, outcome for the human animal, right? Like, it just makes me go back to that point of like, why can't we take all of that and create a healthy eating or a fitness app or an app that would work within the structure of a professional organization to enhance productivity?
So I think we can. I think it's possible, but I think that it probably won't take the form that people would expect. In many cases, the most effective behavior change apps actually change behavior through like a trapdoor. And this is just me theorizing right now. I don't have any proof of this, but like, if I think about what is the most effective exercise app that's been created in the last decade, well, it's probably not actually an exercise app. It's probably something like Pokemon Go, because that got people, that got millions of people to walk 5 or 10 miles a day, but it wasn't an exercise app at all. And I think that there's something maybe there for people who do have good intentions, who want to change the world in a positive way and are really serious about changing behavior. Think about what those trapdoors are. What are things that actually motivate people? Saving money, making more money, winning the praise and approval and respect of their friends, earning a higher score on the leaderboard. And if you can figure out how to have a secondary healthy behavior happening as they do that, that might actually be something that could really stick and get millions of people to do something different.
Yeah, explain that idea of the secondary healthy habit.
So Pokemon Go, the real thing that people are trying to do is collect these Pokemon and get a higher score and whatever. But the secondary habit is to do that, you have to go walk around the world and see where they're hidden throughout the park and all that type of stuff.
Right.
And so it's not, none of the people playing that think, I'm going to walk 5 miles today.
Yeah.
They just think, I need to go find where this thing is.
Yeah, and it goes back to your original law, which is creating a system that promotes the healthy behavior without people even necessarily being consciously aware of it, right? That's ultimately how you move the needle.
It happens all the time, we've talked about multiple negative or maybe less healthy examples with cell phones and things like that, where we aren't really thinking about like, oh, I want to sit on my couch and browse Instagram for 3 hours. Like, nobody's waking up thinking that. They're just thinking, oh, I got more likes and what are my friends up to and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of a secondary action that comes from that. Mm-hmm. And this is just twisting it or flipping it on its head a little bit and thinking about how we can have secondary actions that are healthier.
Yeah. All right. So what's the difference between focusing on creating a good habit versus focusing on eradicating or overcoming a bad habit? Like, where should the focus and intention go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't been asked that before, but I think actually there's some important keys. So let me start with a bad habit. I think the most effective place to focus on breaking a bad habit is the first and the third stage of my 4-step model. So the first stage is making it invisible. So that's like reducing exposure. I talked about hiding the television, for example, or really common example people hear, make sure you don't have any sweets in the house.
Yeah, remove the processed food from your pantry, things like that.
So in many cases, again, not for true addictions, but for just these bad habits that we have, we just do them because they're around us. So it's like, well, if you want to spend less money on electronics, don't follow all the tech review blogs. You know, you're constantly being prompted to buy something. Or if you want to lose weight, don't follow a bunch of food bloggers on Instagram. You know, you're like, you continually have to overcome that stimuli. So the more that you can cut out that stimuli and reduce exposure to the negative cues, maybe that bad habit loop just never gets started. And so that's one effective way. I skip over the second stage because our interpretation of cues, the prediction that we have, it happens so fast. It happens lightning fast. As soon as you see that food blog on Instagram, you immediately think about your mouth watering and wanting to eat something. And being able to like shortcut that and circumvent that, it's possible. One of the things that you would have to do is like kind of reframe your mindset and make that thing that previously meant something mean something else, which you can do, but it's hard. It's a hard task.
This is operating on the unconscious mind, right? So you can rewire your neurology over time with new habits that create those new neural pathways, but that's a steeper mountain to climb.
And it takes a long time. So if you join if you previously ate pork, but then you join a religion that doesn't allow you to eat pork, and you start to belong to that group, and you develop friends there and stuff, well then maybe at some point you'll see pork as very unattractive. So you've like reframed how you interpret that cue. But it might take a while to do that. You need to actually build the friendships and have a strong reason to stick with that new belief system. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm going to skip over the second stage because I think it's more difficult for a bad habit. And then the other area where I think you can focus is the third step, which is make it difficult in the case of breaking a bad habit. And if you can increase the friction enough, you won't fall through. So one of the examples I like to give. Victor Hugo, famous writer and author, he signed this book deal to write The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he just kind of like goofed off for a year. He had friends over and had a bunch of parties. He went and traveled. He went out to restaurants. He didn't really do a whole lot. And the publishers got all annoyed with him, and they set this ultimatum. And they were like, "Listen, you need to get this book done in 6 months, or we're going to cancel the deal." Mm-hmm. So he had his assistant come into his room and took all of his clothes out of his closet and put them in a chest, and they locked him up. And the only thing that he was left with was like this large shawl, this like robe. And so he didn't have any clothes that were suitable for having friends over or for hosting parties. He couldn't travel outside of the house. He effectively put himself on house arrest. And so my point there was he made it difficult to procrastinate. He made it difficult to do the behavior he didn't want to do. And it ended up working. He got the book done like 2 weeks early. He wrote it in like 5.5 months. Yeah. And then, now we have The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to being intentional about your environment. I heard a similar story about Jonathan Franzen. I think it was when he was writing Freedom, maybe. But he rented like a crappy, like the most unappealing office, like little, like almost like a hotel room in a terrible building, like in Santa Cruz with like no view or any, and all it was like a horrible table and a really uncomfortable chair. And it was like nothing on the walls, nothing, just to go, no distractions, just write.
Maya Angelou does something similar, I think. For many of her books, she rents a hotel room and she leaves her house, drives there, and writes. There's nothing else.
A lot of screenwriters in Hollywood do that. Yeah, but then they go to fancy hotels and order lots of room service.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So back to this idea of focusing on building good habits versus...
So that's where I think you should focus for bad habits. Mm-hmm. For good habits, I really think all four are effective. The stuff that we talked about earlier with making it attractive and joining a new tribe, I think that's the most difficult of the four because you're asking someone to change their friend group or to find new friends at least. I don't think you have to like abandon the people that are currently in your life if you want to change your habits, but it's just easier to adopt a new habit if you have some friends that are also doing that new thing.
Is there any research on the difference between an in-person peer group, like joining a running club or a gym or whatever, versus like being on a Facebook group where like you're somewhere where that community doesn't exist,
right? But
you have this peer group that's available to you through the laptop?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have not seen studies on it. It's possible something has been done. I just haven't seen it. But I think that having a group like, you're a member of a community on Reddit or a Facebook group or something like that, it's probably better than not having it. If nothing else, you're kind of like seeding those ideas in your brain that maybe you wouldn't be getting from your